Welcome everybody to tonight's talk about trademarking. We have an expert who's going to share his knowledge with us. And I also have a special guest. Joe Foster, the founder of Reebok, is here with us as well. He's going to tell his story about his own trademark experience and what happened to him. You can say hello if you like, Joe.
Well, hello everybody, and Simon, thank you for introducing me. This is fantastic. We just came in today and we've been having a nice meeting with Simon. So thank you and hello.
It's great to have you here. So we're going to start off by hearing from Mo, who's going to tell us his knowledge in the trademark space. And then we're going to hear from Joe for a few minutes about his own personal experience with Reebok. Reebok came about in part because of a trademark dispute. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to take your questions. So if you have any questions, you move over to the Discord channel and we will answer those questions. For those that are on the Discord channel, all you need to do is raise your hand and we'll bring you up on stage to ask a question of Joe, myself, or Mo, of course. So Mo, why don't we kick off with you telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you know about trademarks?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Simon. Well, thanks for having me, and especially with your A-list celebrity guest today as well. So, yeah. So Trademark Works started in 2016 as an alternative to your traditional sort of corporate law firms. So I worked for a few city law firms in London. I found that a lot of the time when they spoke to clients, they spoke to them in a way that they didn't understand, and they sold them a product that they didn't really understand but ended up paying a couple of £1,000s for. So Trademark Brothers was born to deliver transparency, jargon-free, fixed-fee trademark registration service to startups, SMEs and entrepreneurs. And since 2016 it was a hard slog at the beginning, but we've built up a really good solid sort of clientele, which is mainly in the startup SME space. They're all going through funding rounds. They're individuals to larger companies, and yeah, that's kind of the background on Trademark Brothers. But yeah, there's lots of stories on trademarking, and I know there's some questions that you might have, Simon. So I don't know if you want to start off with a question, and then I can kind of ease into answering one of those questions of yours.
Sure. Well, maybe you could start off by just sharing with us all the difference between perhaps registering a company. Let's start with the basics. Registering a
Yeah.
company, owning the URL. Sometimes people think if they've got those two things, they're covered. So maybe just for the sake of keeping it simple initially, you could explain how a trademark works and perhaps how it's different from having a registered limited company of that name and of course owning the URL.
Yeah, sure. So I'll try to keep the jargon to a minimum, but basically, a trademark is an intellectual property right, so it's an actual asset. Essentially, you're buying a piece of intangible property as if you were to buy a house, but instead of getting some keys, you just get a piece of paper to outline that you're the bona fide brand owner. And the difference between, let's say, incorporating on company's house is that essentially that's just your entity, and whatever you're basically incorporated as, it doesn't mean that you have any protection over that brand whatsoever. That just sits there for fiscal purposes, whereas the actual trademark is about you having rights over that brand. Whereas, and I think on the other question that you asked about the URL, having a domain doesn't necessarily give you any rights again whatsoever over a particular brand name. Having a domain at times can be quite lucrative if someone who does have the trademark does want a domain and you want to sell it to them. But having a trademark can also help you relinquish that domain if someone is squatting on it. So there is a way that you can actually get a domain back from someone if they're just sitting there trying to extort money out of you for that particular domain. So essentially, trademarks are, as I said, intangible assets. They are part of the family of intellectual property rights. And intellectual property rights, there are registrable rights and there are unregistered rights. So some of the registered rights are things like trademarks. So what is a registered right? Basically, something that you have a certificate for that you can point back to and say, this is my trademark number, this is my patent number, hands off, that's my invention, or hands off, that's my brand, get off it. So the registered rights are trademarks, patents, designs, and unregistered rights, at least in the UK, are copyright and also trade secrets. So trade secrets are basically, a lot of people say to me, we work a lot with food and drink purveyors, and food and drink purveyors always say to me, well, it's great that I've got my brand registered now, but I want to protect a particular recipe. And I always sort of refer back to KFC or Coca-Cola or one of these large companies and say, well, Coca-Cola or KFC, even though they've got their secret recipe or whatever it is, and there's these kind of myths about the original recipes in Kentucky somewhere in some sort of crypt. Realistically, the way that they protect that recipe is through a trade secret, or what you would sometimes see in a contract called a confidential information clause, where basically your any people that you employ or any people you get as a consultant, when they sign the contract to be a consultant or an employee, they sign a contract that includes a clause that says that you agree to the fact that the recipe is a trade secret, and if you divulge that, we will come after you. And yeah, so that's the intellectual property rights family. And in terms of intellectual property rights, that's kind of uniform across the globe. That those are recognised rights across the globe. In some territories, some of the rights that are unregistered in the UK, you can afford a registration for that. So one of the examples of that is copyright. Copyright tends to be something that's an unregistered right, and the way that you show copyright is usually a C with a circle around it, and copyright is usually given to authors, producers of music, where they produce something. So basically copyright belongs to the original author of any artistic work. So you put a scribble on a piece of paper, you are the copyright holder of that scribble. If I want to assign that scribble to you, Simon, well, you can, actually let's put another example. Simon, you asked me to do a bit of artwork for you. I do a bit of artwork for you. You pay me £50. I give you that artwork. So I deliver the service of giving you that artwork. However, the intellectual property rights still remain with me, because all you've paid for is my service to actually do the actual task of giving you a piece of artwork. If you want the intellectual property rights of that artwork, you'd have to buy them off me because I still retain them. So if you went and made that artwork worth £50 million, I could come after you and say, well, that's my money because actually that's my intellectual property. And you can say, well, Mo, I paid you £50 for that piece of artwork. And I said, yeah, but you didn't assign the copyright to yourself. You didn't sign a contract to say that you're relinquishing me of my intellectual property rights. So a lot of people don't realise that when they start a business, they try and... I totally understand that entrepreneurs are always kind of saying, I'm going to go to my friend to make a video for me, or I'm going to go to a friend to take some photos for me of my product, or whatever it might be. And a lot of people don't realise that actually all of those photos or all of those videos that are being made for them may not actually belong to them, but it's a great way of getting a cheap task done and out of the way. But it can come back to bite you in the arse, and yeah, excuse my language, but that is what happened to sort of innocent smoothies when they were I think they were bought by Coca-Cola, as far as I remember. They had a massive copyright issue because I think some of the artwork didn't actually belong to them, and when they were exiting, that became a bit of a thorn in some of the negotiations. So what I'm trying to say is that intellectual property is really important, but a lot of business owners don't think about the importance of intellectual property until it's too late at times. So
yeah, everybody who's asking questions on TikTok and so on, we will get to your questions in a moment. So Mo's just explaining some trademark rules. And I think you just brought up some really important points there. I think a lot of people listening here might be contracting someone to do artwork for them, or asking someone to write something for them, thinking that they then own it because they've employed them to do it as a service. And it's important to get the actual copyright ownership. Actually, Joe, for your book, you copyrighted your material?
Yes, we have. But it's very important because I can go way, way, way back to start of Reebok, and I drew out the logo, which was a star crest. And whilst I drew that out, I actually took it to my to the guy who did all my artwork, and he actually produced the artwork for my design. But it wasn't until quite a lot later, when as Reebok grew, that we recognised the fact that although I had originated a drawing, by giving it to the Barry, who was say my advertising man, and he did all the artwork for it, that he actually owned the artwork, and he had the copyright, as you say, he had that, and we had to buy it back, which was why. Well, now you learn something, that if you want something doing, you've got to go there and say, but I need the intellectual property rights. So you've got to sign up for that and make sure you actually buy that as well as just the work on the artwork.
Yeah.
So that was very important for us. And yes, we did learn an awful lot about that and trademarking.
So I was just going to say, on the point of copyright really quickly, it can be a honey trap, and even when you're growing and you may say, I'm going to go to a branding agency because we're going to have a rebrand and we're going to do a new logo, a lot of these branding agencies will tend to give you some sort of service level agreement, and within that there's an intellectual property rights section in that. You need to be really careful that you read that, because what you may be signing up to is not total exclusive rights of that intellectual property. You may be signing up to a license of that intellectual property for a certain amount of time. So you need to really be careful exactly as to what you're signing up to. There are some branding agencies that will basically give you those intellectual property rights for a year, and then you would have to renew it, and then you get a bill, and then you say, what's that about? So, be really careful in terms of how you do stuff.
Things. I mean, I had a case in another company I was an investor in, and they got their friend to help them with the designs of materials, and then they actually fell out with their friend, and so suddenly, what was a favour, there was a whole intellectual property rights argument. And so this is something overlooked. The other thing, I mean, it's kind of connected. When you build a website, if you don't own the source code, you don't own the website. So a lot of people will build something and then they think they own the website they hired someone to build. But unless you own the source code, you don't own the website. So what you're talking about is a legal contract, really, to make sure that anything you do get produced, you own it. Equally, if you're a service provider, this is potentially another way to make income. I mean, flipping it,
100%.
right? If you produce something, but you haven't necessarily sold the copyright to it, then you still own that intellectual property. And so this is something I think a lot of people don't realise when they're building out a business, that this is another level.
I'm smiling because I have a friend who has a video production company, and I keep telling him that you do all these videos for people, and you've got a clause in your agreement, because I put that clause in there for you, that every year the lease of that video will expire and then they have to renew it, but you don't enforce it. And he said, yeah, because I feel very bad. But as Simon said, you can make, it is lucrative. You can make some, money out of it. But I'm conscious that was all about copyright, but I'm happy to kind of delve more into exactly what trademarks are and what they protect, if you want.
Yes, please. So just for those that are joining on TikTok right now, I could see a lot of hearts and gifts being given. Thank you, everybody. I give away my income on TikTok, so when you do that, just know I give my income away, because I know I earn money when you do that. So thank you very much for that. But we're just talking about trademarks, and we're learning now from an expert on how trademark works in business. And I'm lucky enough to have the founder of Reebok, Joe's here, listening and sharing his knowledge as well. But Mo, why don't you talk about trademark for a second and share what that actually means, so people understand the technical element of trademark.
Yeah, sure. So trademarks are essentially an exclusive right over a brand name or a brand slogan or a brand logo or any type of asset that you can actually register as a trademark. So that includes sounds, smells, colours. It includes a variation of things. And in the UK now, you can also trademark 3D motions as well. So any sort of little 3D motions that you see on a loop, then you can protect those as well. The starting point for many entrepreneurs or many businesses is to make sure that they've got the word mark locked down. So or the logo locked down. So that one's called the figurative mark, which is the logo. One's called the word mark, which is the word mark, and they're considered as two separate applications, and they're considered as two separate assets. The word mark gives you an exclusive right over that word in whatever format that it would ever appear in. So let's just take Reebok as an example. If you just typed in Reebok into Word, just a plain font, the word mark would just allow you to protect that word in any type of format that it would ever appear in. Even if it appeared in someone else's type of logo, you would still have a right to be able to oppose them or send them a cease and desist letter to stop using that brand. The logo gives you a right over the word Reebok in the context of the logo as a whole. So with the sign, with the graphical design. So I always say Adidas, for example, Reebok, Nike, or a lot of these companies have a large portfolio of intellectual property assets, and the idea for a business owner is to try and protect anything that they're building goodwill in. So just to give you an example of Nike, sorry, Nike will have a trademark on the word on the word Nike. They'll have a trademark on the stylized font with the swoosh tick underneath it. They'll have a trademark on Just Do It, which is their slogan. They'll have a trademark on a product name like Predators or Mercurials. So there's a plethora of things that they're protecting as they go on. And what you'll see a lot of the time, because trademarks take time to register, I can tell you right now what Apple are going to be bringing out as a product 12 months in advance, because they would have had to lodge the trademark 12 to 16 months in advance before they roll it out into the public. And that's the idea. You don't
Did you
you
see
don't let
Meta
it
coming
loose.
in?
I saw some Meta stuff coming, and then after Meta came, the trademark register is flooded with Meta variations. So, you know, and then that becomes problematic, and I'll tell you why. But so ideally, the starting point for any business is to make sure that the word mark is locked down. And then the question is, why the word mark, Mo? Why not the logo? The reason why you don't want to trademark the logo straight away is because I could probably guarantee you from the inception of your company, within the first year or two, you may go out, get customer feedback as to how they see your brand for the product or service that you're providing, and the feedback might be really rubbish. And then you might say, actually, we need to change the logo because it's not hitting with our customers or the base that we want to go for. So why would you spend money on trademarking a logo for 10 years, because that's how many years you get protection for on a trademark? Why would you do that if you're just going to go and change it within 6 months to a year? Might as well wait, get the word mark, because that's actually more useful anyway, and then trademark the logo when you've got a bit more cash flow, and then you can keep trademarking different assets. Once you've decided what you want to trademark, you then have to decide exactly what you're trademarking it for. So there are something called classifications or categories. There are 45 of these categories, and they're harmonized across pretty much the world. And they cover anything from, so 1 to 34 are dedicated to goods, and the rest are dedicated to services. And you have to decide in terms of what your business is doing today, and we tell our clients to think about what your business is going to be doing in the next, let's say, 2 to 5 years, because ideally what you want to do is factor in the diversification of what your company is going to be doing as you grow it. Once you've chosen which classifications you need, you then have to type in descriptions within each of those classifications. So I'll just give you an example. Class 25, which is a class that Joe will definitely know because it's for clothing, footwear and headgear. Within that, you would then also go hoodies, sweatshirts, sweatpants, polo shirts, blah, blah, blah. So all of those classifications have subsections within them, and to try and make it really sort of mold it to what your company does, you want to try and be as specific as possible, but at the same time you want to be as broad as possible, because you basically get more rights, because you might diversify into something that you may not have envisaged at the time of filing the trademark. Once you've drafted the trademark application, then what happens is you lodge the application with the respective intellectual property office or patent and trademark office in the US, or whatever else variation they might have in any other territory. The examiner gets the trademark application. So there's an examiner at the intellectual property office. They get your application and they look at it and they say, right, Simon's applied for this trademark. Brilliant. The first test we're going to look at is the trademark distinctive? So what does distinctiveness mean? Distinctiveness basically means that the brand that you're looking to secure cannot be reflective of the goods or services that you're providing. So I'll give you a very basic example. I own an orange juice company, and my orange juice company, I'm going to call it 100% freshly squeezed orange juice. When they're looking at the distinctive test, the examiner will say, we're not going to allow Mo to get a trademark on 100% freshly squeezed orange juice as his brand name for his orange juice company, because that will give him a monopoly and exclusive rights over that term, and that term is totally descriptive of the goods that he's going to be providing the public with. Therefore, you can't get a trademark on that. So it will fall on that. So the distinctive test is basically it can't reflect the goods or services that you're providing. The next test is, are the classifications that you've chosen correct and all the descriptors within those classifications correct? Brilliant, great. And then the last thing they'll do is, in the UK, they'll do a search on the register to see if there are any other trademark holders that have either a similar name or an identical name to yours. Now, the Intellectual Property Office in the UK has an onus to send a letter to pre-existing trademark holders to say, hey, Simon, Mo, Joe, they're going to go and apply for this trademark. We're just giving you a heads up. You've got a 2-month period to oppose their application if you want to, if you feel that it would conflict with your pre-existing trademark and therefore cause disruption to the goodwill that you've created amongst your consumers. So if that happens, you're already running through a gauntlet, because you may be you may be going through the trademarking process and you may get opposed by someone that has something similar or identical. If the examiner doesn't pick anything up, then happy days. You go through the process. After the examination, your trademark gets published onto the Trademark Register for 2 to 2.5 months. That is called the application publish period, but I like to call it the opposition period. And that is where the pre-existing trademark holders can oppose your application if they feel it conflicts and it would cause confusion to consumers. And that's the key thing: is would it cause confusion to consumers, and would that confusion lead to a loss of goodwill for your company? And basically, they may oppose your application. If they don't oppose your application, great, it goes through, it registers, and it's registered for 10 years in the UK, and you've got exclusive rights for those 10 years. There's a big but and big thing to remember, which is, although you've got protection for 10 years, for whatever reason, in the first 5 years, you don't use that trademark for some of those goods or services that you've protected it for. If in the 6th year I wanted to trademark the same brand for one of those classifications, and you opposed me, but I could prove that you're not using it for that particular service or goods, then you're going to have a big problem, because I can hold you to account and ask you for a statement of use. And if you can't surface that, you're going to have major issues, because you could lose the rights that you've gained basically through that trademark registration.
This is why Five Guys
yeah.
have done pop-ups in China. And they don't have stores there, but they want to protect their name, so they do pop-ups every 3 to 5 years just to show use in that market, right?
Yeah.
And there's something else I want to mention you're bringing up there. I don't want people to miss. I personally trademarked my own name, Simon Squibb, and once I'd done that, I could also claim all my social media handles. Some people had cyber squatted some of my social media handles, so I can actually show it to the social media companies, and they do release the name to you. So even your personal name is something to think about trademarking.
100%, yeah.
No,
No. So yeah, I was going to say, and then a lot of people, so basically that process happens in the UK, and then it's registered for 10 years. In terms of the opposition, a lot of people will be asking questions about oppositions, and how do I then, if I know that there's something similar or identical in the register, how do I circumnavigate potentially having a high risk trademark application right from the beginning? Well, the answer to that is to make sure that you're doing a really thorough search on the register prior to filing your trademark application. Now, a lot of people will cut the corners, and I totally appreciate that a lot of people don't have money to dedicate to this service, and I always say, well, you hire an accountant. Well, why wouldn't you hire someone that can actually do this professionally for you? But anyway, the search is really important, and frankly, that's where we add our value in the search, and also the classification descriptions when we're drafting your application. The search is so important because it can actually foresee any potential issues that you might have in the application publish period or the opposition period, and it can try and sort of weed out any potential oppositions you may receive. It may not weed out everything, because there might be stuff that you can't factor in for, but it will weed out as much as possible. And a lot of people will say, well, I can go on the ipo.gov.uk website, I can type in the word and do a search. The thing is, when you do a search, yes, you can get lucky, and yes, you can file the mark, and yes, it may register, but do you actually know what you're looking for? And that's the question. Is, if you don't know what you're looking for, then it's problematic, because even tiny intricacies can make a large difference in that application publish period, whether as to your application is going to get opposed or not. But yeah, that's kind of a nutshell whistle-stop tour of the process itself in the UK. A lot of people ask me, why should I even get a trademark? Frankly, I always say you don't need a trademark to trade. That's the long and short of it. It depends on your aspirations as a business. I say, if you're, if someone came to me and said, Mo, I run a butcher shop on a high street, and I want to trademark it, I would just say, don't bother wasting your money, because if you know that you're not going to turn this into some sort of franchise or chain, then realistically, you may want to protect it, and that's great. But if you're not looking to build a global brand, then you may not need it. The idea is that the trademarking process is there for people that are kind of trying to aspire to build a global brand, have a presence across multiple platforms, and that becomes even more difficult in the kind of day and age that we're living in today, with the fact that everything's on e-commerce platforms, and your product, if it's in some sort of central, storage center in the middle of I don't know where, in a container, and your products are flying out left, right, and center to different countries, or you've got a distributor in, let's say, Munich, and you've only got a trademark registration in the UK, and that distributor says, do you know what, I'm going to cut this guy out because this product's doing brilliant out here, and I'm just going to trademark this brand and try and, get someone to manufacture this product down in Germany, you're screwed because you can't stop them from having that brand in that country. So, there's lots of different factors that you want to consider in terms of, do I need a trademark? Well, ideally, yes, if you're an aspiring business, of course. Well, do I need to trademark in the UK if I'm starting out in the UK? Yes, ideally, yes. Where do I trademark after the UK? Well, ideally, you want to trademark in English-speaking countries because that's probably going to be your next market, because that's the easiest market to go to, because English-speaking markets are quite similar to wherever your home market will be. So, and it's always going to be a chicken and egg scenario unless you're a Reebok, or unless you're a Nike, or unless you're an Adidas, where you've got an internal IP department, or you're paying someone on a retainer that's going to just be, bashing out the trademarks for you every time you say, I'm bringing out a new product in the next 12 months or 14 months or whatever it might be. So there's lots more I could say, but I'm conscious that there's lots of questions as well. So yeah,
there is, and we always have limited time. So we anyone wants to ask a question, we are on Discord, and of course we're also live on TikTok. But we're going to be taking questions on Discord, and you can get to Discord through the link in my bio if you're listening now and want to ask a question. I will, if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand now on the Discord system, and I will bring you up on stage in just a moment along with Mo. Just before we go there, I just wanted Joe to share his story about how Reebok came to be, because that's actually because you started an original name that ended up being a trademark issue, right? Do you want to share that?
We did indeed. Look, Mo, you're taking me back 50 years. I remember crossing this threshold into IP, and it was amazing. Yeah, we started off, Jeff and myself, very innocent and naive, started off as Mercury Sports Footwear. We were doing very nicely. 2 years into the business, and yes, our accountant said, look, boys, you should register that name. Okay, why? Well, why? Well, somebody else may start using that name, and then you've got a problem. Oh, okay. So we tried to register Mercury, and we went to see a patent agent in Manchester, and he looked it up, and no, it was pre-registered. And we said, well, what about that? Well, they're not using it, but you can buy it. We said, how much do they want for it? They said £1,000. In those days, £1,000 was a lot of money. We didn't have it. They said, we can challenge them because they're not using it. We said, how much will it cost us to challenge it? Probably £1,000. So we couldn't do it. He pointed through the window and said, if you need a new name, look at that. And that was Kodak. And we said, what's with Kodak? They made the name up. It's their name, their invention. Okay. Well, we wanted a name that we could live with. But he said, don't bring me one name, bring me 10. 10 names. So we didn't like this. However, we thought Falcon Sports, that's good. Cougar Sports, yeah, pretty good idea. But I'd won a dictionary when I was only 8 years old. During the war, I won a dictionary. It was an American dictionary, a Webster's dictionary. I liked the letter R, and I flipping through my dictionary and soon came across Reebok, R-E-E-B-O-K. And we think, what's that? We read it. It's a small South African gazelle. We're a running company. Gazelle. Top of the list. We put it top of the list. And I went back to our patent agent. They said, okay, we'll give it a try. It was the only one that came out of our 10 names that was really clear. Two things with it. One was Rebo, which was sort of phonetically named. He said, we don't think, ladies' underwear of all things, we don't think they will be thinking about it. Railbrook was Tootle's name. And he said, but we act for Tootle's as well, so we're not going to worry about that. And the only thing that the registrar said, we can put you in Part B of the register. Now, Mo, you've never mentioned Part B, but we were in Part B of the register. And we asked why. And he said, well, if somebody starts making shoes out of Reebok skin, you can't stop them. Okay, mind you, I think it was 10, 15, maybe 20 years later, the registrar came back and said, we've moved you to Part A. And we said, why? He said, because everybody now knows that Reebok is a sports shoe. So that's how we became Reebok, but quite scary, I can tell you.
Did you have to trademark it in every country from that moment? Did you do it one country first and then?
Well, we were given advice on where, so there was Europe, Japan, and America. English speaking or rather large countries were, if they started trading, you'd have difficulty. And we did have difficulty in, say, the Latin part of Europe, Spain, where even though we had registered in Europe, Spain were a bit of rogues and they could, first to the post, they could register our name. We did get it back, but that's another story. But yes, and it's quite expensive. And there's another story on that as well, but enough for today, I'm sure.
Did you have to buy the website? Did you get Reebok.com at the time?
At the time, 1960, we
No,
didn't
no,
have computers.
I mean later, because, yeah. 1986, right?
Yeah, we didn't have URLs, we did nothing like that, no.
Because that's a whole nother level of complication, isn't it, when they all come out?
When
it's
they
like
all come
Nissan.com. It was owned by an individual.
Right, okay.
And he actually won the legal battle because Nissan, the car company, tried to say to him, "Oh, we own Nissan.com. We're Nissan, the car company." And he said, "Well, I'm Mr. Nissan, so I have every right to use use the .com."
Yes.
But yeah, well,
I was going to say just really quickly. I just want to pick up on what Joe said, which is actually really important, and it's a piece of advice that I give to a lot of my clients, which is please do not get emotionally attached to a name. The worst thing that you could possibly do is get emotionally attached to a name. Start the business 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and then go, okay, I'll trademark it 4 years in. They come to me, they do a search, and what Joe said, you come with a clash, and the options are you buy the rights, you rebrand. When you say rebrand, it's like you've just crucified them, but that's the stories that, those are the stories that I have to go through every single day, and it's frustrating because trademarking is unfortunately a bit of an afterthought, and realistically it should be the first thing after incorporating your business that you should do. So yeah.
Well, I've invested in 73 startups, and 46 of them have had to change their name because of trademark issues. The costs involved in that alone is just huge. Yeah. Did you have a big emotional feeling when you changed the name to Reebok? I mean, now of course it feels like Reebok, but at the time it must have felt.
Well, at the time when we went back to the patent agent, we said, look, we need to have Reebok. We've got to be in love with this brand, and we need a name, and we've got to feel for it. So we were emotionally, even at that time when we didn't have it, emotionally we wanted Reebok. The rest, no. This is the one we fell in love with. And, to run a company and to be successful, certainly in something like a sports footwear company, you need the emotion, because that will drive you. That will drive your brand. And so we were so fortunate to get Reebok, and we did. We fell in love with it. I'm still in love with it. It's a beautiful.
But that's good. That's important. Yeah. I mean, and I was just going to say, it can be on the flip side. I'm in a current situation where one of our clients, a tiny startup, trademarked a slogan. So they just threw all their cash flow in trademarking their brand name, and then they said to me, "Mo, we really want to trademark this slogan because we're in love with it." And I said, "Okay, brilliant." Trademarked it, registered it. 3 months later, a large fast food company originating from America, and I say large, massive, is now in the UK, or is just putting their foot in the UK, is dipping their foot in the UK, got their branding agency to come up with a slogan. God knows how much they must have paid that branding agency, and it's just a reverse of the words, or it's just a different words, and it means exactly the same thing, and we're currently in a negotiation as to how much they're going to buy the asset off our clients for. So, you could be on a gold mine. Another story, a year and a half ago, I sold a trademark for £100,000 for a small client of mine who just registered it and didn't use it, and a Canadian company came and said we just need to get this done because we threatened to invalidate their trademark in the European Union. So yeah, it can be lucrative.
Facebook bought Meta. They bought the Meta million. Yeah, $60 million US from one company that owned it, that was using it as their company name. Yep. But I mean, that's another way to go, isn't it? You've got so much money that you can launch a name and buy the trademark later.
Exactly.
I'm 100% sure they didn't make that announcement out Meta until they'd done the paperwork on buying that trademark. Otherwise, that would have been 60 million. That would have been 460 million. But Well, look, I want to move over to Discord. We've got
Sure.
at least 3 questions on there now. So I'm going to end the recording on the YouTube, which we'll be putting up later, of course, also on the Discord channel for everybody that's missed it today. And so, but I just want to say thank you to Joe for joining. And thank you to Mo. Thank you for rhyming, Joe and Mo. Appreciate that. Makes my life a little easier as the host. But we'll move over to Discord now and just answer a few questions. So we'll see you over there. And for anyone on YouTube listening now, you must join our Discord community, Entrepreneurs Helping Entrepreneurs. If you're an entrepreneur, you absolutely have to come over to the Discord community, jump in and get involved, and that's where we're going to go to now. So see you there in a moment, Mo.
Thanks.
Don't close your browser.